There's a certain stillness that blankets the world between the hours of 3 and 5 a.m. It's not just the absence of noise, it's a kind of silence that speaks louder than words. The streets lie quiet, the sky untouched by sunlight, and most of the world remains wrapped in the warmth of sleep. But if you've ever found yourself awake during these hours, eyes wide open, thoughts racing, heart inexplicably stirred, you've likely felt it. That sense that something more is trying to reach you. That maybe, just maybe, this isn't just insomnia or a restless night, it's an invitation. What if waking up during this time isn't a coincidence? What if it's a call to listen, not to the world outside, but to the one within? These early hours, often labeled as inconvenient or disruptive, may actually be sacred. In many traditions, 3 to 5 a.m. is known as the spiritual window, a time when the veil between the seen and unseen grows thin, when our intuition sharpens, and when clarity is most likely to visit us if we're still enough to hear it. But let's be real, in our fast-moving, always-on, hyper-distracted lives, stillness isn't easy. We've been conditioned to ignore silence, to push past discomfort, to scroll away the whispers of our own spirit. And so, when we wake up unexpectedly before dawn, we often reach for distractions. Phones, worries, overthinking, when what we really need to reach for is alignment, intention, presence. That's why this message matters. If you keep waking between 3 and 5 a.m., this speech isn't here to diagnose you or label it as some mysterious spiritual awakening, though it could be. Instead, this is a gentle nudge to treat this time as a portal, a daily checkpoint, a reset button for your soul. Because what you do in those hours, how you meet the quiet, can shape the rest of your day and maybe even the rest of your life. So we're going to explore 3 simple, powerful things you can do if you find yourself awake at this hour. Not rituals for the sake of rituals, but practical steps that tune you in to the deeper part of yourself. Think of this not as a prescription, but as a practice, a way to move from restlessness to revelation, from chaos to clarity. This isn't about fixing your sleep schedule, it's about waking up in more ways than one. So if you're ready, if you're listening, if you've ever wondered why your soul seems to stir while the world sleeps, this is for you. When you wake up between 3 and 5 a.m., the instinct might be to sigh in frustration, reach for your phone, or mentally replay yesterday's worries and tomorrow's responsibilities. But before you fall into the noise again, consider this. Maybe you're not meant to fix it, maybe you're meant to feel it. See, most of us live in a rhythm of control. We try to manage everything, schedule everything, optimize everything. So when something disrupts that, like waking up too early, we instantly treat it like a glitch. We go into problem-solving mode. Why did I wake up? How do I fall back asleep? What if I'm tired tomorrow? But in that rush to fix, we miss the point entirely. What if waking up during these hours isn't a problem to solve, but a doorway to walk through, a rare moment when the noise is gone and your rawest, most honest thoughts have space to rise? What if that restlessness is your body trying to get your attention, not physically, but spiritually? Maybe something inside you is trying to surface, and the only time it can do that is when the world finally goes quiet. That's not something to rush past. That's something to sit with. So instead of resisting it, what happens if you lean in, not with your intellect, but with your presence? No overanalyzing, just noticing. Take a breath. Let the tension melt from your forehead, your shoulders. Let your thoughts swirl without trying to organize them. Feel the discomfort without pushing it away. That feeling of uncertainty, of restlessness, it's not your enemy. It's a message. And more often than not, that message gets clearer when you stop trying to fix it. There's wisdom in your body, there's intelligence in your emotions, and there's healing in your awareness. But you only access those things when you stop trying to dominate the moment and start listening to it. The stillness of 3 to 5 a.m. offers a space where that kind of listening becomes possible. Not passive listening like background noise, but deep soul-level attentiveness. The kind of listening that doesn't look for answers, but simply honors what is. This isn't easy, especially if you're used to living in your head, but it's one of the most powerful shifts you can make. To move from asking, how do I stop this, to asking, what is this moment trying to show me? That subtle shift opens up a whole different experience. Instead of anxiety, there's curiosity. Instead of frustration, there's gentleness. And over time, that gentleness becomes a practice, a way of relating to yourself not as a machine that needs tweaking, but as a soul that needs tending. So don't rush to fix it. Don't distract yourself out of it. Just feel it. Feel what's rising in you during those sacred hours. Because that feeling, however strange or heavy or unexpected it may be, is where your truth lives. And the more you practice meeting it with openness, the more peace you'll carry back into the daylight. When you find yourself awake between 3 and 5 a.m., that quiet in-between space isn't just a break in your sleep, it's an opportunity. And one of the most powerful things you can do with that time is engage in 3 intentional practices that help you reconnect with yourself. These aren't just morning rituals or spiritual exercises for the sake of doing something productive. They're invitations to return to a part of yourself that often gets buried under the weight of daily noise, your presence, your intuition, your truth. So instead of turning over and hoping sleep takes you back, lean into the moment, use it, let it shape you. The first practice is stillness, deep, undisturbed stillness. And no, it doesn't have to look like perfect meditation. You don't need incense or mantras or any fancy. Just sit or lie there, eyes open or closed, and breathe. Really breathe. Let your breath be slow, intentional, grounding. You're not trying to stop your thoughts. You're not trying to achieve calm. You're just being, fully, unapologetically. The stillness is not about silence for the sake of silence. It's about making space. Because when the mind isn't being pulled in 100 directions, that's when insights arrive. Unexpected ones. The kind that don't come when you're distracted or busy. In stillness, you might hear something your mind's been too loud to notice during the day. Something like clarity, or grief, or peace, or direction. Whatever shows up, let it. That's the wisdom of stillness. It doesn't push, it waits, and it reveals. The second practice is journaling. And again, don't overthink this. You're not writing a masterpiece or trying to impress anyone. You're letting your inner world spill out onto paper. This is where you can name what's bothering you, or what you're afraid to say out loud, or what you're dreaming about, but haven't given yourself permission to chase. There's something almost magical about transferring your thoughts from the intangible space of your mind to the physical space of a page. It makes things real. It makes you real to yourself. And sometimes when you write without judgment, just letting the words come, you'll uncover things you didn't even know you were carrying. That kind of honesty is rare, but it's available to you in those early hours. Use it. Let the pen become a mirror. Let the page hold what your heart's been carrying all alone. The third practice is intention, and this one is subtle but incredibly powerful. Once you've sat in stillness and released what's stirring through journaling, you create space for something new. And into that space, you get to plant a seed. It could be one word: clarity, peace, courage, release, or a simple sentence: I choose ease today. I trust the unknown. I am enough, even in stillness. These aren't affirmations meant to fix you. They're declarations of alignment, reminders to your spirit of what you're stepping into. When you speak intention into the quiet, it echoes, not just in your mind, but in how your energy moves throughout the day. That intention becomes a compass. A soft one, yes, but one that gently points you back to yourself every time the world tries to pull you off course. So those are the 3 things: stillness, journaling, intention. Together, they form a kind of early morning alchemy. Not just a way to pass the time until sleep returns, but a way to engage with life before the world wakes up. A chance to be with yourself fully, honestly, intentionally, when no one else is watching. And over time, that quiet practice will shape you, not because it changes your circumstances, but because it reminds you who you are inside of them. Waking up between 3 and 5 a.m. can feel like an inconvenience, especially when your first thought is, I have to be up in a few hours, why now? But here's the truth that often gets overlooked in our culture of constant doing. This window of time is less about productivity and more about presence. It's not asking you to stay awake forever. It's simply asking you to listen, and often just long enough for your soul to be heard. We're conditioned to think that if we're awake, we must act. Get up. Get things done. Turn the moment into something tangible. But the deeper truth is that this early hour doesn't always demand action. It often just asks for attention. Quiet, intentional, honest attention. And that doesn't take hours, it takes willingness. So many of us miss this. We either try to fight the moment or force it to mean something big. But the real magic of waking at this time isn't in overextending ourselves. It's in the simple act of meeting ourselves just long enough to check in, long enough to feel something we've been numbing, long enough to whisper a truth we've been too busy to hear. The power isn't in staying awake, it's in what happens in the space between waking and sleeping. That short, often overlooked space where you choose to meet yourself instead of avoiding yourself. Now, you don't need to light candles and meditate for an hour. You don't need to write pages and pages in a journal or suddenly change your life overnight. Sometimes 5 minutes is enough. 5 minutes of breathing deeply, placing a hand on your heart, and simply asking, "What's here?" And then waiting, not for the loud answers, but for the subtle ones. The sensations, the feelings, the whispers you often ignore in the noise of the day. Let those 5 minutes be sacred. Let them be the most honest part of your entire morning. Let them be enough. And once you've given the moment its due, once you've shown up, listened, felt, then it's okay to rest again. In fact, you'll often find that once your spirit feels acknowledged, your body follows. That's the incredible thing about presence. It doesn't deplete you. It restores you. It says, you're safe to rest now. You've heard what needed to be heard. And often, that's all your body was asking for in the first place, to not be ignored, to not be pushed through or dismissed, to be noticed, held, honored. We tend to believe we need to do a lot to change how we feel. But more often than not, it's the small intentional pauses that shift everything. Those few minutes of conscious attention between 3 and 5 a.m. can soften your inner world, dissolve anxious thoughts, and return you to yourself in a way that rushing through the day never could. So no, you don't have to stay awake forever. Just stay long enough to remember who you are, and that will always be enough. There's a reason the hours between 3 and 5 a.m. have been called the hour of the soul across cultures, traditions, and spiritual teachings. In those quiet hours, while the rest of the world sleeps, something extraordinary happens. It's not loud, and it doesn't demand your attention, but it's powerful. The veil between your inner and outer world begins to thin. And when that happens, what usually stays buried beneath distraction, noise, and routine begins to rise to the surface. Thoughts, feelings, memories, even truths you've been avoiding, they all come forward, not to overwhelm you, but to remind you. Remind you of what you've been carrying. Remind you of what you've forgotten. Remind you of who you are underneath all the layers you wear during the day. This time of the morning is more than just a random wake-up call. It's a spiritual checkpoint, a subtle but sacred opportunity to check in with yourself before the world starts pulling you in 1,000 directions. It's when your inner voice, the one that often gets drowned out by emails, social media, conversations, errands, expectations, can finally speak. And more importantly, it's when you're quiet enough to actually hear it. This isn't about being mystical or abstract. It's about recognizing that in a world that moves faster by the day, we've lost touch with our inner rhythm. We wake up and go straight into performance mode, into survival mode, into proving mode. And we rarely, if ever, pause to ask, how am I really? What do I need? What am I avoiding? But between 3 and 5 a.m., when no one needs anything from you, and the air itself seems to hold a kind of stillness, you have the chance to ask those questions, and even better, you have the space to answer them. Treating this window as a soul check-in means honoring it, not with fear or resistance, but with reverence. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't need to fix anything. You just need to show up for yourself. And when you do, when you lean into that space with presence instead of panic, you begin to notice things, subtle shifts, quiet nudges. You remember that you've been holding tension in your chest for days, and suddenly you exhale. You realize that a certain thought has been looping in your mind, and now that you've named it, it loses its grip. You reconnect with a feeling you pushed away because there was no time to feel it. These moments are not dramatic, but they are deep, and that depth is where real alignment begins. When you use these hours to listen to yourself, you begin to navigate your life differently. Not reactively, but intuitively. Not from urgency, but from intention. You make choices from a grounded place because you're no longer disconnected from your truth. And maybe most importantly, you stop seeking answers outside of yourself because you've remembered that so much of what you're looking for is already within you. You just needed a quiet enough moment to hear it. This check-in is not a luxury, it's a necessity. Not for the sake of productivity or spiritual performance, but for your own peace. You deserve to feel connected to yourself. You deserve to live a life that reflects who you really are, not just the version of you that shows up for the world, but the one that sits in the dark and dares to feel everything. And when you start honoring those early hours, even just occasionally, you'll find that your relationship with yourself begins to heal. And from that healing comes clarity. From that clarity comes courage. And from that courage comes a life lived on your terms, from the inside out. One of the most misunderstood aspects of waking up between 3 and 5 a.m. is the belief that once you're awake, you're supposed to stay awake. That you have to suddenly transform into a hyper-productive version of yourself. Or that you need to stay up and use this time to radically change your life. And for some people, yes, these early hours might naturally turn into a new morning routine. But that's not the point. Not for most. What's more important, what's more sustainable, is understanding that this time doesn't require you to stay awake for hours. It just asks you to be present long enough to hear what's calling for your attention. That's it. And sometimes that's only 5 minutes, sometimes less. And that is more than enough. This isn't a test. It's not a spiritual boot camp. It's an invitation, and like all invitations, you get to decide how long you stay. The beauty of this moment lies in its simplicity. You wake up, something within you stirs, and if you're willing, you pause long enough to listen, to check in, to breathe, to feel. It's a sacred interruption, not an obligation. And once you've honored it, once your spirit feels acknowledged, you don't need to force anything more. In fact, many people find that once they've sat in that quiet for just a few moments, once they've said, okay, I'm here, I'm listening, their body naturally returns to sleep. Why? Because the tension that woke them, the unprocessed emotion, the swirling thought, or the intuitive nudge has been seen, felt, released. The body and mind are no longer holding it in the background, and so rest can return. But we resist this. We make it more complicated. We judge ourselves for being awake. We panic about being tired later. We try to analyze the meaning of it all, or worse, distract ourselves from it entirely with our phones or our thoughts. We either go into overthinking mode or escape mode. And both of these responses pull us away from the very thing that would bring us peace, present. You don't need to decode the universe at 3:47 a.m. You don't need to turn your bed into a meditation cushion or your thoughts into a productivity plan. You just need to show up for yourself in that moment, softly, briefly, honestly. There's something powerful that happens when you trust your body's rhythms instead of fighting them. When you trust that if you're awake, maybe there's a reason. And maybe that reason doesn't require a big explanation or long process. Maybe it just needs a breath, a gentle acknowledgement, a sentence spoken aloud, a journal entry that says, I don't know why I'm awake, but I'm here. That act alone, the willingness to meet the moment instead of resist it, is an act of healing. And here's what's remarkable. The more often you allow yourself to be present in those early hours without pressure, the more those moments begin to transform. What once felt like a frustrating interruption becomes a time of deep connection. You begin to associate those quiet minutes with peace rather than anxiety. You begin to trust your own timing. And over time, even if you wake up again, you don't fear it. You welcome it. Because you know you don't have to do anything big, you just have to be. And once you've done that, once you've checked in, realigned, breathed into the space, you're free to return to rest. Not out of exhaustion, but out of peace, out of wholeness. So no, you don't have to stay awake forever. You don't have to do anything heroic with that time. You just have to listen long enough. Stay just long enough. And when you do, you'll find that even the smallest moments of presence can create the deepest sense of calm, Not everything that wakes you up in the early hours is meant to be solved. That can be a difficult truth to accept, especially in a world that constantly demands answers, certainty, and control. But waking up between 3 and 5 a.m. is often not about logic. It's about something far more subtle, far more sacred. It's about mystery. And the most powerful thing you can do in the face of that mystery is not to run from it, not to dissect it, but to make peace with it, to sit with the unknown and allow it to simply be. Because sometimes the moment is not meant to give you clarity right away. Sometimes the moment is meant to shape you through the very act of staying with it, of trusting it even when it doesn't make sense. This can be deeply uncomfortable. We are trained, almost conditioned, to interpret everything, to label every emotion, to give every experience a clear narrative. When something interrupts our sleep or unsettles our spirit, we immediately try to identify it, name it, explain it away. But the truth is, the deepest parts of us don't always speak in language. Sometimes what rises in those early hours isn't meant to be interpreted. It's meant to be felt, raw, wordless, mysterious. And that doesn't mean it's meaningless. In fact, some of the most important shifts in your inner world happen not through understanding, but through surrender. Making peace with mystery doesn't mean giving up. It means softening your grip. It means saying, I don't know what this is, but I trust that it matters. I trust that it belongs. And in that trust, you create a sacred container for your own growth. You stop forcing answers and start allowing emergence. You learn how to hold space for yourself without needing to fix yourself. And this is where true healing begins. Not in the moment you figure it all out, but in the moment you accept that you don't have to. There's a quiet kind of wisdom that comes from this space. When you stop trying to make the moment into something else, you begin to see it for what it truly is. A reflection of your inner world, unfolding exactly as it needs to. You realize that not every awakening is a problem. Some are invitations. Some are blessings in disguise. Some are echoes of unspoken prayers returning to you in silence. And some are simply moments when your soul longs to sit beside you in the dark, not to change anything, but to remind you that you're never alone. The more you practice this gentle, open-hearted presence with the unknown, the more resilient you become. Not because you've gained more control, but because you've surrendered your need for it. You become less reactive, more grounded. You start to notice the beauty in the in-between spaces, the quiet pauses, the moments that don't come with clear meaning. And in doing so, you become more in tune with your life, more connected to your intuition, more able to flow with what is rather than resist it. So if you wake up and don't know why, if your heart is heavy and you can't explain it, if your mind is quiet but your soul feels loud, let that be okay. Let the mystery remain. Sit with it like you would sit with an old friend, one who doesn't need to speak to be understood, one who simply needs your presence. And in that silence, in that unknowing, you may find something even deeper than clarity. You may find peace, not because everything makes sense, but because you've stopped needing it to. And that is where real freedom lives, not in control, but in trust. Not in solving, but in surrendering.